Dead Space 2 deserves all the praise in the world for its gorgeous visuals, action-packed set pieces, and tight gunplay. In fact, most of the game is pretty brilliant. One aspect of this spectacular sequel stands out more than all of them, however, the way developer Visceral Games uses environmental storytelling to gradually reveal the fate of the Sprawl's residents, and their children. Isaac Clarke's attempts to escape a necromorph outbreak may take centre stage, but it's the background tale of the tussle between the Church of Unitology and EarthGov which shines brightest. The manner in which this battle between church and state unfolds, and its gruesome crescendo in the Titan Elementary School, are some of the finest work found in any horror game. Chapter 1, set in the Titan Memorial Medical Center, mostly focuses on setting up the overarching narrative, but it does also contain several important details regarding this video's subject. Isaac is being held against his will by EarthGov, who seem to be very interested in learning about the marker which caused the outbreak on board the USG Ishimura. Fortunately, he is soon freed by a man named Franco Delisle, who meets his maker in grisly fashion.
Listen, you're in terrible danger.
The woman you heard on the other end of the radio is Dana LeQuinn, who serves as your guide during the game's early stages. Prior to Dead Space 2's launch, the interactive comic Dead Space Ignition released, which follows Franco right up to the point he's turned. While it's never stated outright during Ignition that he's a Unitologist, and we'll talk more about the religion shortly, it's heavily hinted at, and when playing the PlayStation 3 or Xbox 360 versions of Dead Space 2 with an Ignition save on your hard drive, you can gain access to several special rooms which are otherwise inaccessible. Franco's logs are found within them, like this one in the hospital, and they make his allegiance to the church quite obvious.
Final report. Partner situation resolved. Target 0 awaits, and I'm on my way. All men be praised.
This idea of Unitology being extremely pervasive, of it secretly spreading its tendrils out across every part of society, including its rival EarthGov, is key to what makes them so frightening. Most, though, either won't have completed Ignition or will be playing on PC, where the rooms cannot be accessed conventionally at all, which means the insidiousness of Franco's rescue may go unnoticed. Of course, with a later twist revealing that Dana herself is a Unitologist, it's possible to put 2 and 2 together retrospectively, but even then, not everyone will, which is a shame given how unsettling it is. Most other information relevant to the EarthGov and Unitology story in this chapter is imparted via text and audio logs. One speaks of patients constructing miniature markers.
Orderly TPS report 1418. The recent realization that the popsicle sticks were being constructed into marker-like miniatures for over a year has led to a search of the unit for any other such phenomena.
Another of someone doing the same with a different material.
Orderly TPS report 1138. Patient 3 has again shit the bed. Patient continues to draw what looks like a marker in anything she can, including her own feces.
Which, by the by, you can see the results of towards the beginning of the chapter. A text log also speaks of patients becoming increasingly agitated and combative, while another requests that anyone suffering from anxiety or psychological problems be referred to other hospitals, as medication stocks were running low. The author attributes a previous spike in cases to layoffs on the station, as well as tensions between Unitologists and EarthGov, but says the new wave is something different. A final text log from a doctor to the hospital's chairman expresses concerns about what are apparently secret labs in the psych wing, labs where unethical work may be taking place. By the end of this chapter then, we know that EarthGov are very interested in the markers, that the Church of Unitology had managed to infiltrate their ranks, and that the hospital was struggling to deal with a huge number of admissions due to anxiety and psychological problems. With it revealed during Dead Space 2's second half that EarthGov were building a marker of their own, it's safe to assume the signal it was producing was the cause of citizens' anguish. Chapter 2 is when Visceral's extraordinary commitment to advancing this side of the story through environmental details begins to become evident. A prevailing theme it's easy to miss is that while the Church of Unitology and EarthGov oppose each other, in many ways they're very similar. We won't connect the many dots until later, but the dots nevertheless need to be pointed out, and one is this poster, and others like it, which puts EarthGov's Director Tideman front and centre, along with a three-pronged slogan: courage, compassion, stability. Remember that. As Isaac begins to explore the Titan Heights residential complex, a full-blown necromorph outbreak is well underway. Approaching several apartments, a woman tries desperately to reach her mother before being dragged away. But it's what's inside that is truly disturbing. A necromorph we can assume was once the mother in question is an awful enough discovery, but even creepier is what's found on the bedside table. There's a book, Eternal Life, presumably a Unitology tome, as well as pictures of grandchildren. Innocent enough, you might think, except in one of them a girl is holding a replica marker, an indication we can assume that children were exposed to the religion in some capacity. As for what's going on here, it's open to interpretation, but whatever you believe it to be, it's horrible. After moving to another floor, a note can be found on a board which reads, "My family were killed by necromorphs, need money to buy plasma cutter, while a baby's cries fill the air." And in another apartment nearby, shelves are filled with Unitology literature. All these tidbits add up to paint a troubling early picture of just how involved in residents' everyday lives the church had become, and in those of their children. But what makes them so brilliant is that it's quite possible to play through the chapter in its entirety without even noticing many of them. If you pay attention, if you survey your surroundings thoroughly, you'll spot them. If you don't, then you won't. Like Franco Delisle, who managed to work his way into an unwitting EarthGov, the Church of Unitology's involvement in things isn't always immediately obvious, and their subtle presence in the background goes a long way towards furthering that idea. Things quickly get even more upsetting during Chapter 3. During a brief foray through an industrial area, Isaac spots something horrifying. The creature then disappears, and Isaac soon arrives at the shopping district, which also houses the Titan Station Elementary School. It's at this point that a necromorph variant known as the Pack attacks. Created from children, they are nightmarish, huge numbers of them charging at Isaac as they try to overwhelm him. Their appearance here makes sense too. After all, where would you find necromorphs created from children, if not near a school? Where Unitology's influence has remained relatively hidden up to this point, there's no hiding it in the mezzanine's main area, with a church recruitment centre looming large. A text log found here talks about harvesting Titan, the moon the station gets its name from, for resources, and another just inside the entrance of the recruitment centre details the many restrictions EarthGov has put on the church. They were forced to run under reduced operating hours, the size of their events were limited, and they also needed permits to distribute literature, for example. It also mentions that convergence is nigh, whatever that means. Video screens at the centre's entrance also play the church's slogan on repeat: one people, one purpose, one mind. Another three-pronged slogan. Strange. Inside the centre, a third log speaks of recruitment having slowed, likely due to EarthGov's actions, with additional budget and members of other chapters of the church to be provided in response. Back on the topic of moons, you might also start to notice a lot of moon-focused posters and similar. Using event to continue on, even this helpful but also very dead engineer was seemingly a Unitologist too. The last part of the chapter takes place within Cassini Towers, another residential complex, home of the Church of Unitology itself, as well as many of its most devout followers. As you'd expect, it's a grim place indeed. There are candles everywhere, strange writing in an unfamiliar language covers many of the walls and floors, and a text log from one sister to another mentions that rebirth is going to happen very soon. All of these combined make it seem a lot like the Unitologists were aware of what was coming. That certainly seems to be the case, given dead bodies like this one can be found with "It's time" written on the wall above it. Incidentally, many corpses like this one are wearing hoods, presumably a nod to the idea of everyone becoming one after death and individuality no longer mattering. The kids' room next door is equally distressing. Where the adults apparently knew exactly what to do, this child was more conflicted. On the one hand, there are phrases like "Mummy is sick" and "Keep us safe from monsters" written on the wall. On the other, there's also "Enjoy the pain" and similar. At long last, Isaac arrives at the church itself. Towering over it is a giant marker replica, and on the walls, a member holds a child's hand, the most overt sign of Unitology's interest in recruiting children so far. Once again, there are also signs that there was a level of awareness of the outbreak being imminent, with the screen above the church inviting Unitologists to join them in final prayer. Inside, several terminals tell the Unitology story, or at least the story they want residents to believe in. They say that in 2214, founder Michael Altman found a marker in a crater, which spoke to him about a divine plan to unify mankind and usher in a bright new future. Millions flocked to hear the word, but this also led to Altman's assassination, with believers founding the Church of Unitology in response. In the present, Unitology is billions strong, with Titan being a hub as it's where the church itself started, with its members nurturing a relationship with the marker while awaiting glorious convergence.
As we await glorious convergence, it is important to continue to nurture our relationship with the marker and understand the future it is preparing for us.
After taking all this in as best he can, Isaac is attacked by an EarthGov gunship and finds himself trapped in the church. Chapter 3 is a lot less subtle than Chapter 2, although there are still things you might miss, but that's exactly what was needed. As mentioned at the start of this video, it's a gradual build-up designed to leave you completely on edge by the time you enter the church, and Visceral Games executes perfectly. From the introduction of the pack, to the recruitment centre, to the fate of the many adults, it's all absolutely terrifying, and the idea that there was some foreknowledge among Unitologists of what was going to unfold makes it a million times worse. As for the Sprawl's children, well, at this stage, it looks like they never really stood a chance. Chapter 4 opens with a message from Dana.
Dana, the Church of Unitology? Why here?
It's one of the few places on Titan Station that Tideman can't monitor.
And it provides two whopping great hints that she herself is a Unitologist. First, she somehow knows EarthGov can't monitor communications within the building, and second, she's in a safe room in the church. Again, it's that idea of Unitology being pervasive, an eerie background presence you may not even realise is there. If it hadn't already become abundantly clear, the Church of Unitology is a mirror for Scientology. For one thing, their names are similar. For another, they both deify their human founders, L. Ron Hubbard for Scientology and Michael Altman for Unitology. Both have belief systems rooted in the stars too, with Scientology believing there exists a space dictator named Xenu, while Unitology reveres the alien markers. Another key Unitology belief is the idea of convergence and unification, of humanity becoming one, while Scientology published a series of books called the Unification Congress. As an aside, even the front covers of Unitology books look extremely similar to those published by Scientology. The two also place great value in their congregation's monetary contributions. A Scientologist's rise through the ranks is partially based on their monetary donations, while in the church there's a log discussing the future earnings a Unitology member may generate. Another text log also requests that the indoctrination centres be kept off limits to the general public during tours of the church. It's one more way Unitology remains highly secretive, just like Scientology. This grounding in real life the Church of Unitology has is absolute genius. In isolation, the church may not have been seen as particularly realistic, when in actuality it mirrors real life very closely, apart from the stuff with all the monsters, of course. Earlier, we saw a Unitology poster with moon imagery, and there is a huge amount of it used in every corner of the church. What it all means didn't make sense until after the conclusion of Dead Space 3.
Draws near. Even now we can feel it, teeming with life, teeming with markers. From each world we devour, a new brother will rise and be made whole. Our network will grow, and we will live forever.
What you just saw were Brethren moons, necromorphs which are created following a convergence event. Convergence is essentially all necromorphs and dead tissue combining after an outbreak, resulting in a superorganism which uses fragments of the planet it was created above as a protective shell. That is what the moon imagery in the church alludes to, with some of it being more obvious than others. The horrifying truth behind Unitology is hidden in plain sight. Before moving on, this is also the ideal time to discuss the similarities between the Church of Unitology and EarthGov. As mentioned earlier, while they're in active conflict, the parallels between them are so prevalent that it's surely intentional. Both factions were in their own way responsible for the outbreak. EarthGov created the marker, but across Dead Space's mobile game and Dead Space 2's severed downloadable content, we learn that Unitologists offed themselves near it, subsequently becoming the station's first necromorphs. Director Tideman is the face of EarthGov, with his three-pronged slogan being courage, compassion, stability, much like Michael Altman and one people, one purpose, one mind are to Unitology. The two factions also share an interest in markers and moons. EarthGov cracks moons for resources and wants to harness a marker to generate limitless energy, while Unitology's aim is to create a marker and trigger a convergence event, leading to the creation of a Brethren moon. And, as we've already discussed to some degree and will return to shortly, both are heavily invested in marketing themselves to the Sprawl's children, especially within the Titan Station Elementary School. The hostility between EarthGov and the Church is bad enough for adult residents, but they may not even perhaps realise that the Sprawl has become a battleground for the hearts and minds of their children as well. This multifaceted mirroring serves to highlight how dismal the outlook for the Sprawl's residents always was, no matter which side eventually prevailed. Chapter 5 has one or two points of interest, but much of it has already been covered, like the moon imagery. The big reveal is the gigantic crypt of sorts where the bodies of Unitologists are stored. Even after death, there's no escaping the Church's clutches. Their corpses simply lie, waiting for convergence, at which point they will become part of a Brethren moon. An accusatory text log is found there too, which suggests that EarthGov employees may have been responsible for a technical hitch which resulted in several bodies thawing out. To what ends EarthGov did this, we do not know. There's also the big reveal with Dana.
Well, that's why we brought you here. To build markers for us. To spread glorious convergence to the entire galaxy.
You people are unbelievable! Just give me the fucking cure and let me go.
No, we don't want to cure you, Isaac. We need that precious little head of yours just the way it is.
And after barely escaping death at the hand of a huge tormentor necromorph, Isaac arrives back in Cassini Towers with a bump. At long last we arrive at Chapter 6, the scariest half hour or so the Dead Space series has to offer, one which also contains some of the best environmental storytelling you'll ever encounter. What makes it so much worse is that it's squarely focused on the children. Back exploring the apartment, this scene awaits. Dad is sat on the sofa, Mum is lying on the bed, and on the projector, a girl we can safely assume is one of their children is pictured taking part in a Unitology initiation ceremony. A while later, this audio log from a distraught parent can also be picked up in a 0G area.
I hope you're happy. I never wanted to come here, but you had to drag us to this shithole. And now look what's happened! My baby girl turned into something! How could you? How could you leave us alone? Did you hear me? I had to kill my baby girl!
Then Isaac comes across the Titan Elementary School for a second time, except now he's able to head inside. What follows is the horrendous payoff for all the incredible world building Visceral has done up to this point. We've seen how Unitology has seeped into the lives of so many on the station thanks to the little details you have to look for and what was contained within the church. We've seen how EarthGov has behaved just as poorly, even if their intention of creating a limitless energy source to help humanity was in a way a pure one. And we've seen how the conflict has affected both adults and children alike. In the school though, it's all about the effect it's had on the children. And there are so many things to spot here in such a short space of time that we'll need to work through them fairly quickly. In the reception area, the first grade drawings on the wall all look fine, some from the second grade feature the marker, and by the third grade, several pupils are clearly very distressed. Look at the picture to the furthest right here, for example. There are also posters for a play the kids put on named Metamorphosis. Maybe it's a stretch, but it wouldn't be surprising if this was a way to help get them used to the concept of convergence. In the first classroom, all the books are written for very young children, which won't be the case later, and the children the cribs belong to have been turned into crawlers Isaac unfortunately has to dispatch. In the second classroom, there's a poster showing pupils how to do maths using a rig, an attempt to normalise EarthGov's activities from an early age. Back in another hallway, a third grader has drawn a picture of a necromorph slasher, which was apparently fine to put on the wall, and further along, a school nurse's report talks about students playing too rough. She thought growing up on a space station was having an effect, whereas the marker and its signal causing mental turmoil was actually responsible. Activating a switch on the stage in the gym, it becomes apparent that likely every child in the school became part of the pack or was turned into a crawler, such are their numbers. There are also several reminders for children to eat their pellets, suggesting that before the outbreak they didn't even get to have the luxury of eating proper meals much of the time. Escaping the gym and entering the final classroom, another teacher speaks of how half his class had imaginary friends and were seeing deceased relatives. Parental involvement was also steadily decreasing, so when the kids really started to struggle due to the marker's influence, they didn't even have a support network due to their parents experiencing similar symptoms. Unitology was quick to take advantage of the situation at least. A nearby shelf is filled with their books. We can also assume then that one or more of the school's teachers were Unitologists with motives beyond simply teaching children their ABCs. After another run-in with his deceased girlfriend Nicole, Isaac leaves the school and continues on his merry way. It also marks the end of Dead Space 2's split focus between his escape efforts and the Unitology vs EarthGov conflict, with the former brought to the forefront while the latter fades away almost entirely. What a shame that is too, as the way Visceral Games integrates so much of the story of the battle between church and state, and its appalling consequences, into what is ostensibly a fairly straightforward find a way to flee the monsters narrative is masterful. And they save the best until last, too. For 5 chapters, Visceral slowly unveils the sinister intentions of the Church and EarthGov's involvement in the outbreak, with it revealed that it was the Sprawl's children who suffered most. Indoctrinated from an early age by their family and within their school, falling foul to the marker's influence and eventually becoming necromorphs, they never stood a chance. Indeed, their fate and the way it unravels creates one of the most terrifying stories in gaming. Thanks for watching the video, boys, girls and engineers. If you had a horribly good time, do consider liking, subscribing and sharing your thoughts, and hopefully we'll catch up again soon.